All right. I think we're good. We'll see. This is nowhere near the right size. Cool. Wait for some people to show up and stuff. GitHub Rust Adventure Bevy. Probably gonna repeat this actually. So let's do. Hey Xavier, how's it going? Let's make a new directory here for. I don't know. I've cloned this repo so many times in this folder. I need to name it something else. So let's do active or something. Fine, and you? Doing a little tired today, but otherwise fine. Let's see. GH repo clone Rust Adventure Bevy examples. Hey, wow, I've been watching your other Bevy tutorials. Curious coincidence to catch you live. Cheers from Frankfurt. Nice. Yeah, I saw you comment on one of them. Glad you're enjoying the videos. I think today I have a set of examples that I guess 0.15 is really going to impact a number of these. So I'm thinking that we update those today. Because I think that doing some 0.15-ish work will be really useful. The RC is still, I don't think the RC is out yet. I didn't check this morning. Did I set this up correctly? Yeah. The RC isn't out yet, as far as I know, but it's coming very soon. And there's a bunch of changes for required components and stuff. Hey Roberto, how's it going? So I've got this repo of like, well, before this it was kind of like almost random examples, things that were kind of like useful and whatnot, and maybe different ways to write shaders, and there's like an 8-way sprites thing in here for multi-directional input and some other things. And I intend to kind of clean this up a little bit. Some of these won't be updatable today because Bevy tweening very, very likely doesn't have a main branch. We'll have to remove Bevy Inspector eGUI from everything that we work on anyway. Some of these will be fine, like shield with depth should be okay. And we'll do some updates for 0.15, which changes, specifically handles are going to be one of the big things. So required components has changed the way meshes and materials and transforms and things like that are added. So it's not a material mesh bundle anymore. I think material mesh bundle is actually deprecated. Let's see if the material mesh bundle, yeah, deprecated since 0.15. So you have to use mesh 3D and material mesh 3D, and a number of the examples are working these days as opposed to last week. Last week before were kind of rough on main. So I figure we'll look into this, start converting some of these examples, rewriting some of them. And that'll give us nice little things to start working on. I have a list of all the ones that I want to keep and the ones that I want to get rid of. I think I got rid of most of the other ones already. And there's a couple things in here that are like, I rebuilt the Hades start menu in Bevy UI, and I think I just want to move that to a separate repo because it uses a bunch of assets, and I'm still not sure how best to put large assets into Git repos. And I don't want to keep adding more like this to the same Git repo because it'll just keep getting bigger and bigger. So yeah. So yeah, rotating column relies on Bevy tweening, which won't get included. I wrote better examples for attaching materials to GLTF screens, so we can upgrade the pressure wave, probably simplify 8-way. Maybe we'll look into some storage buffer stuff. I'm a little bit nervous about doing anything that's like fairly new because of the way that main has been broken fairly recently. And we will have to use main, so. Let's start off with, I think in the roots, do I have an override? Yeah. I think I'll have to change all of this anyway. eGUI is not going to be here. Asset loader is not going to be here. These other things are not going to be here. Shader utils pre-pass debug. Pre-pass debug is basically a crateified version of one of the examples anyway. So that should be pretty simple to update. Or pretty straightforward to update anyway. So let's do, what do we have in the examples here? Fresnel, Raymarch sphere. I guess instead of commenting these out, I should move these into exclusion. The libs definitely has some though. Let me add a little bit of a marker here to kind of signify that these were enabled before. Libs has shader utils, which has its own examples. So let's start off with those. I think that they'll need to update. Let's start with I don't have any bins in here, right? Yeah. Start with screenshots. Okay, so screenshots relies on Bevy Inspector eGUI already running into that. Does it though? Doesn't look like it does. Screenshot manager, primary window. Do I have that in the cargo toml? Yeah. Let's get rid of that in the cargo toml. And this will also be 15.0 dev, I think is the right version. And this is in the pre-pass also has the same thing. I use Bevy Inspector eGUI all over the place. I hope that we get kind of a version in Bevy at some point. I know they want it. But we'll see. I know the editor work is all moving towards that too. Spam texts in the morning. Always great. So these demos then, these screenshots and whatever, are not particularly complicated. One of the things that is in this library is basically a bunch of shader functions and stuff. So let's see. Perlin Noise 2D is literally just an implementation of 2D Perlin Noise with a defined import path. And then in lib.rs, we create these handles ahead of time and use load internal asset for most of them. We need to use load internal asset for anything that supplies a function to a shader. I think that still hasn't been fixed. At some point in the future, I want to be able to use embedded asset. Embedded asset currently works for like materials. So if you're going to apply a material to some geometry or some mesh or whatever, embedded asset is just fine because you can reference it like that. But for provided functions to other shaders, load internal asset from my previous testing is the only thing that currently works. And there's an open issue to move Bevy's own usage of load internal asset to embedded asset. But I remember there being some issues with that, and it still hasn't been done yet. So the reason we're doing this first is because I use the shader utils in some of these examples. I think it's useful to be able to like maintain this library of shader functions just to know when things like this change. This also gets published to crates.io for each version. And then the shader material pre-pass is just a quad in front of the screen. So I'll have to spawn in a mesh and stuff like that. But the rest of it, I don't think changed. I don't think the method of accessing the depth buffer or anything changed. But we've got an example for that, so we'll be able to run it. And this is how you would reference that embedded asset. So that pristine grid material that we had can be impl material override the fragment shader like this. Which is actually really nice. I know there's people working on WGSL, or like we're going to call it Weasel, I guess, WESL. WGSL extensions, basically. Which should be really interesting. It looks like they're about to be prototyping in Bevy land soon, but we'll see. All right, here we go. I chose to do a full build instead of just check. Okay, so in these examples, we need to start with screenshots, I guess. We've got plugins, default plugins, shader utils plugin. Shader utils plugin should be just fine. I don't see any issues popping up here. We have new screenshot functionality, so we'll have to look at that in a second. The overall more important thing is that these bundles are now deprecated. So camera 2D bundle is deprecated. Camera 3D bundle is deprecated. Text bundle is deprecated. Or should be. And then I should check the lock file for which version of Bevy we're using too. Material Mesh 2D bundle deprecated. Camera material. Point lights also got deprecated, or not point lights, point light bundles also got deprecated. So Bevy internally is replacing all of these bundles with required components. And I think those are the only changes here. So the easiest thing to do, if you're ever in this situation, is to go to the Bevy examples. We're working with main right now, so We just pop this up. Examples, then I guess we've got 2D and 3D. Let's go with 3D. Or not 3D, but shaders. Where's shaders? Shaders. And then we've got shader material and shader material 2D. And this is what we're going to have to do here. We're going to have to use mesh 3D and mesh material 3D. And I guess mesh material 3D can take any... I don't know what this handle is anymore. I would have said this was a handle to a custom material, but that feels a little weird. Let's look at the docs. So usually I don't show this on stream or in videos and whatnot, but this is devdocs.bevyengine.org. It's useful if you're doing things off of main. It's useful if you're doing development of Bevy itself. It is not something that you should ever look at if you are just like consuming Bevy. Especially if you're newer. So I don't include it in any videos or anything. I don't promote it. But if I'm actually using it, then. So this is pub handle M. M is just fully generic here. And part of the reason I'm doing this too is because I have other crates that I want to update and getting a little bit better, of a better handle. Get it? Handle. A little bit of a better handle on the changes for required components is going to be useful. Hey, Lamix, how's it going? What are you up to today? I think the default material got removed in a recent PR, or the PR to remove it is still up. So that documentation is going to change. So it's 2D. This is material mesh. And we don't need the bundles anymore at all. So mesh 3D and mesh material 3D, which I'm going to copy that in. So no more default. Visibility, transform. These names go away. This gets wrapped. It's a little bit awkward that VS Code like strikes through this whole thing while I'm writing this. Mesh 3D. And then get rid of that. And I think that should work. It won't auto format for me because the rest of the file is still broken, but that should all work. And then same thing for everything else that we're doing here. So let's find the material mesh bundles and start doing the 3D stuff. And then we'll do 2D after, just to keep it in line a little bit. Transform, visibility, default. I guess we can start doing 2D too. Mesh 2D. Transform. I'm assuming this is mesh material 2D. I didn't actually check, so. Material mesh needs to go. Closing on that needs to go. What have I done here? Add mesh material 2D, transform mesh 2D, spawn. That looks weird. Oh, visibility. Yeah. That's what I get for not having auto formatting. So visibility goes, material goes into material 2D, wrap it. Lomix, you were just working on the Radiance Cascade stuff, right? Mesh 2D. Material 2D. I feel like this is going to be the majority of most people's updates. Doing mandatory paid work while enjoying Bevy content. Huge deadline on Monday. Yeah, that's fair. 2D. Transform material 2D. Well, I guess what I should say is I'm hoping these are most of the updates for 0.15. The way it's shaking out right now looks very hectic. Cannot wait to continue next week. Nice. That's very cool work. I won't distract you by asking about it on stream, but Radiance Cascades have interested me for about a year now. Mesh 2D. Material 2D. Okay, and then we've got camera 2D. Oh, we still have another mesh material 2D. We have at least only one more. Cool. Mesh 2D. It would be nice if this was the only 0.15 updates that like release candidate users ended up seeing. I doubt that's going to be true though. I think a couple semantic changes have snuck their ways in. The required components refactors were massive, and then the retained rendering world was also massive. Okay, so we need to look at camera 2D bundle is probably just going to be camera 2D. I didn't quite catch exactly what the exact refactor was. Okay, so it's just camera 3D, I guess. So camera 3D doesn't have any fields on it either, right? It's interesting. Camera 3D. Okay, we moved depth load and depth textures to camera 3D. That's interesting. I feel like that wasn't there before. And in any case, these are not the things that we care about. We care about the transform. The transform can be independent now. I do wonder, part of the reason I wanted to do this today is I'm curious about how this is going to impact educational material. Because one of the interesting things pedagogically is like, okay, so you've got camera 3D and you're going to spawn it in, right? How do you know that you can use a transform here? Or how do you know what other components like work well with a camera 3D? Before with bundles, it was nice because the code was kind of self-documenting a little bit. You could put a camera 3D bundle in here and then like have Rust Analyzer fill out all the fields, and like that was the things you could do with a camera 3D. It's a little bit more awkward with required components. Like everything gets more concise, but to figure out what components are actually getting added here gets harder. This is camera 2D with the defaults. And then text bundle and point lights, I think, are the last things we need for this example. We might also want to update the screenshot stuff. Screenshots have gotten a lot better. Or the API for screenshots got a lot better. I think Charlotte did that work, if I remember correctly. Use point light instead. Does point light have all the same stuff? Not even close. We don't have any customizations to point lights in this other than like the color, right? Yeah, transform. Okay, so this is going to be pretty easy in terms of an update because it's going to be point light and then it'll be transform. And those are now just separate, which is nice from the perspective of somebody who already knows what they're doing. Now I've got point light transform. I don't have to do a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't have to write default everywhere, which is really nice. I think I was okay with writing default because it meant that people would be able to discover things a little bit easier. And especially one of the things that I used to do is like remove that default and then do a Rust analyzer, like fill match arms here kind of vibe. But we'll see. I think required components haven't fully landed yet in the sense that they're supposed to power BSN. And I think that reserving any judgment until BSN like lands is probably a good idea. Okay, so text bundle is probably also just going to be text, right? Oh, we just removed text bundle. Okay. Text. Top level UI text components. Okay, so text is now a UI node, which means what were we using here? Hopefully it was a... I think these were UI nodes. Note that the transform on this entity is managed automatically by the UI layout system. That'll be a little confusing too. Okay, so text bundle from section, right? Huh. This isn't going to have a from section on it, is it? I guess it's just new. That's interesting. I thought you could... And then text style becomes a new thing, which is fine. And then with style used to apply to the node. So I guess that becomes this. So text new is here, text style. What did I have with style on? Hey Trent, how's it going? And then this is too many of these. So theoretically, this is the same thing. Right, text bundle from section with a text style and then with a style. So we have style and text style in the same entity. Yeah, just doing some light, very light upgrades of some 0.15 examples. Just trying to stay a little ahead of the curve, you know? Now that main is stabilizing a little bit more and that we can actually reach in and feel like things are usable. Okay, so the big change for text is that sections doesn't exist anymore, which is interesting. What are we querying for here? Name text, names. Query name, name text, text example name. So text now doesn't have sections with the new cosmic stuff. Is that accurate? Yeah, I heard a lot of big changes coming. Kind of stuck your head in the sand, just waiting for the release notes so they can wash all over you. Yeah, especially over the last 2 weeks, that's been the right move. If you can afford to do that, the required components landed, retained rendering world landed, cosmic text stuff or the text rewrite landed with the required components stuff. I feel like there's other stuff that I'm missing off the top of my head. So then here, do we just not have sections anymore? That is actually, honestly, probably better. If that's the way that this is all going to work. I feel like sections was always kind of a confusing thing to teach people because it was like, okay, this text has sections. Which section do you want to access? Like, hope you pick the right index. And then how do you maintain those indexes across a code base? Right? Like, if you have like static text replaceable, then you have 4 sections, 2 of them are replaceable, but technically the API lets you replace any of them. So hope you get the index right. Okay, and then screenshot, I think, is the other thing. Screenshots for sure have gotten an updated example, so I'm just going to go directly to the screenshot example. Is each section now its own entity? I actually don't know the answer to that. Offhand. Let's find out. So this was the proposal. Oh, good. It was in a comment. Text span, text style, text layout, text block, text, text 2D, and text span. Okay, so we now have text spans. So yeah, it sounds like they are their own entities. I think that's where the ghost node stuff came in, actually, now that I think about it. Ghost nodes. Yeah. You're you're a bit confused by the ghost nodes. Read through the PRs but can't remember. Hey Ryan, good to see you. Yeah, so ghost nodes are fragments. Roberto, do you have any like web experience like with React or anything like that? That's going to be the absolutely easiest way to explain. Wow, that didn't go where I wanted it to at all. So React has this like HTML like syntax, so it looks a little bit weird. But they use this special syntax here, open close bracket and close bracket, with no name inside of it. And this is referred to as a fragment, which you can also write literally with the word fragment in it. Yeah. They're fragments. View, yes. I think View also has fragments, if I remember correctly. I don't remember what exactly they call them because I'm not a huge View person, but I do believe they have a similar concept. Let's do this. Components now have official support for multi-root components, i.e. fragments. So 3.0 syntax, I guess that just works. That's really not helpful for explanation purposes, but yeah, technically Vue does have that too. Basically, this is like a non-renderable element that groups together other elements. Theoretically, I think in Bevy, the big difference is that you can use those to attach reactive behavior to. So like there's still entities and whatnot, but they are not they're not used for layout, but they are used for like reactivity trees. Or can be anyway. I've never actually seen the ghost node example. So spawn a ghost node with children ghost root. Node bundle with children. This text is rendered under a root node. Normal root. Yeah, okay. So a ghost node is just like a container, effectively. A container that doesn't render, but you can attach stuff to. So technically you have this root entity if you need it for something, but that doesn't get included in the layout. The other thing worth noting about ghost nodes is that while they are, I believe, a critical piece of the text rework PR, they are in other ways kind of still, I don't want to call them experimental, but they are open to feedback, I guess. It's not like ghost nodes are the way forward for sure and we'll use them forever. It is very much like we think ghost nodes are useful and we're going to try moving that way. Which, to be fair, in every other UI library that exists, like on the web and stuff, they all have this concept of fragments. So I'm not surprised to see that come up. And I guess text spans then are what are used instead of sections. So theoretically, each of these text spans is now an entity as a result, and then you can directly put components on that. That's much nicer than sections, honestly. So now you can choose to access them like effectively by index for children or whatever. Where is there like a text update thing happening here somewhere? Writer. What have we called writer? Writer is UI text writer. What is UI text writer? UI text writer is new. Let's check out that. Interesting. UI alias for text writer. A system parameter for reading and writing text spans in a text block. Okay, so we've moved from sections to something called a text writer, which looks like it has spans in it. Hello. Good morning. So we've got text iter roots without text span, spans with text span. So at the very least, you can now access editable. No, these are roots and these are spans, so that's not true. I was going to say you can access editable text separately from static text, but I don't think that's actually true. Because I think you still have to have text spans for everything, right? So these are technically static, but they'll still show up as text spans. And this is spawning them, so you can technically look these up directly, probably. I don't know. I guess this is useful in some use case. So this uses writer. It gets all the texts. So the root nodes of the, or what I would have thought was the root nodes. Yeah. The root nodes of the text spans. And then it takes writer.text with an entity and an ID. Or no, that's an index. Okay, so we're just indexing into this thing still. I hope there's a way to do this via extra component. Because one of the things I didn't like about sections was that you had to do this indexing. Shutter angle and samples. And it's also, this looks like it's 1 indexed and not 0 indexed. Because that would have gone here, which feels really weird, right? Like we've got, unless text is 0 for some reason, which would also be weird. So this is 1 and this is 2. And you use the writer with the entity of the text and the section that you want to update, or the span you want to update. So yeah, to answer your question anyway, these are all separate entities now. It looks like we still currently access them by index, which feels weird. I wonder if there's a... Yeah. Anyway, the APIs that exist right now are all index-based. Why is there text in my motion blur? Because they do this thing where, especially if you look at PC Walton's examples, they tend to actually do, I wanted to call it rich UI, but that's not technically true. It's basically just a bunch of text. But if you look at the animation masking example, which I think I've run recently, so I think I can just get to pretty quickly. If you look at the animation masking example, it has a whole bunch of like buttons and stuff. And then the motion blur example has a whole bunch of text. And it's like kind of a replacement for, no, I want to go to temp. Animation masks. Oop, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh, that's 0.14. That's why. I have multiple checkouts of Bevy all over the place because I'm doing a whole bunch of different stuff. Cargo run example animation masks. Yeah, there we go. 1 crate to compile. So it's all of this. So at the top here, we have click a button to toggle animations and associated bones, and then like left, front, hind, tail. It's all of this kind of stuff. Especially if you look at a PC Walton PR and they wrote an example, the example will be like, it'll have some UI in it, typically, or have some debug UI and feedback and stuff. So that's why That's why there's text in the motion blur example. So that's this text up top. Maybe I make this bigger. The text doesn't get bigger though. So I think, what is it? Plus. Am I not clicked into this? I feel like that text should be updating and it's not. Oh, 1 and 2. That's really awkward. Yeah, so if you want to like change the shutter angle or whatever, or change the samples, then you can see what sample count you're at. Which is super useful. But yeah. In any case, screenshots. Got distracted. Window, I think, screenshot. So the screenshot API got a better API, I think. Maybe it's still the same as the one that I remember. It's an observer now, which didn't exist before, so I'm definitely not using that. For some reason, I thought this screenshot on spacebar. Oh, save to disk is the one. So now what we have, instead of screenshot on spacebar like this, we'll have screenshot on spacebar, but it'll fire an observer effectively. Let's make sure I got the name right. Path, screenshots, name text. I need to pull in some of my queries here. And then save to disk comes in from Bevy, and capturing also comes in from Bevy. And we don't need counter because I don't use it in this. So we've got on space, construct a path, spawn the screenshot for the primary window, observe and save to disk. And then that triggers screenshot saving. That looks weird to me. No, okay. Yeah. It's just querying for all entities with capturing. That looks a little bit weird. I thought there was a different API. It's cool that it's removing the cursor icon though. This is really cool actually. So this little thing is actually just modifying the cursor as it saves. I guess in case they're very large saving. But we need to add this to update, right? Screenshot on spacebar, screenshot saving, both in update. And then our old screenshot on spacebar can go away, I think. Yeah. And then screenshot manager goes away. Material mesh bundle goes away. And then maybe we've done enough to run this. Kind of. Invalid field accessor UV. Duplicate asset loader pre-registered for asset type image with extension HDR. That's interesting. Let's see. Perlin. So we're saying mesh.uv is invalid now? That feels wrong. Bevy PBR forward IO, maybe that's my issue. Let's look at the shader examples. Assets, shaders. Vertex output here comes from prepass IO. It's really weird that that's an invalid accessor. Bevy PBR prepass IO. Bevy PBR prepass IO vertex output. That one I don't know the answer to. That's interesting. Let's look at the other ones here. Maybe that one hasn't been updated yet for some reason. No, this hasn't been touched in ages either. This is the only thing called mesh. Do we not have UV coordinates? That would be really weird. Let me take a look at the crate. I think this is still in Bevy PBR, right? Bevy PBR, source. I don't think it's in prepass. JBU preprocess, forward IO. I wonder if I don't have this set. That was a long time ago, though. No, not normals. This channel selection. Channel selection was also a long time ago. Channel selection should have been around already. I'm not doing anything funky in here, am I? Let's see. Materials. Let's go for Custom material, screenshot, Perlin, screenshots. I think I have these in a separate. Let's put them all in here. Material. Yeah, okay, I did define them all in here. These seem fine. Asset as bind group, debug, material 2D. Let's see. Bevy. Examples, shaders. Shader material 2D. Asset, type path, bind group. Everything I would expect to see. Transform, mesh 2D. Search for bugs, maybe? Oh, dang. Right. Okay. So, oh, that's really annoying, actually. This is the 2D Perlin noise material that we were writing, and we're pulling it in from forward IO, but it should be pulled in from mesh 2D vertex output. That's really annoying, actually. I don't know how we currently solve that. But that is not my favorite, honestly. So that's 2D, that's 3D, and then we have the same issue with the other 2D for simplex. Two D, 3D, 2D. Simplex 3D is broken for some reason. Voronoi is also broken. See, Voronoi is easy because we'll just fix that import. Simplex 3D. Don't know what the issue is yet. Simplex 3D seems to not want to render. But why? Let's do something very silly first to make sure that this is still even running. Simplex 3D still not working, but not throwing any warnings or anything either. So I'm assuming that I messed something up in the transition. Unfortunate that I don't have auto formatting working. Let's see. Am I in the right folder here? Let's go into libs, Bevy, shader utils. There we go. Now we got a format. Rust Analyzer just doesn't want to. Okay, so we've got a mesh that is a cuboid, has a half size of 1. This is probably not the right way to do cuboids anymore. Although it is working in the other example. Back to the examples again. I keep closing that out, don't I? So examples, 3D this time, 3D shapes, cuboid default. I guess it is cuboid still. So this adds that, transforms it 050, visibility hidden. Maybe it's just not being shown. That would be weird. Also, this is the wrong one to look at. Zero 50 scale, splat, meshes, cube. Ah, I left an entity. I put everything into example here. Camera type, entity. Camera type, entity. Command spawn. Am I spawning a mesh 2D in for a 3D cuboid? That is also kind of annoying that you can make that mistake. I think that was the issue though. So I put a mesh 2D with a cuboid in. That's really strange that you can do that though, right? I guess there's no way for it to know. Which makes me feel like mesh 2D and mesh 3D are like not useful as labels. Because like they're not preventing me from making mistakes. So I know these can't be put together. To me, the issue here is that you can put any kind of mesh into a mesh 2D. Which makes sense on some level. I feel like it's a clash between like from the user side, right? You kind of want to be like, oh, I'm dealing with 2D stuff, right? And on the engine side, everything is a 3D mesh anyway. Yeah, there we go. It's back. Why is it so slow at compiling? Is it not using fast compiles? It's definitely not using fast compiles. But also, I don't know exactly what I just did to trigger that. I'm also using Git directly is the other thing. So when you use Git dependencies, I don't want to say it breaks some of the caching and stuff, but it doesn't work as well as if you're using like released crates. So in my cargo toml right now, I'm doing an override for like the Bevy Git repo, which means it has to go out and fetch, which means that I can run into situations where it like feels like it needs to recompile the source code that I downloaded. And that doesn't happen for crates.io releases. So the compile here is recompiling Bevy crates for some reason, um, which normally doesn't happen. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say they're slower to compile per se. I would say that the git deps break the ability to do some caching that it usually does. Because like normally these crates wouldn't recompile. They wouldn't even be part of the incremental compile. Only my source code would have been. All right, so let's get our thing going back here. See, like that was an incremental recompile too. So like, okay, so that's simplex 3D, wonderful. This is Voronezh in multiple different configurations. Okay, so everything works now. I think it all looks the same, so I'm not gonna take the screenshots again. But now that all works, so the pristine grid or the Voronezh are the next examples to go with. Voronezh looks very simple, so let's do that. This is gonna be mesh or mesh 2D. Transform comes out. I really wish VS Code had some other. Oh, I'm never going to remember this, am I? Is it mesh 2D material or material mesh 2D or. That is really not going to be my friend. Mesh material 2D. I feel like it could work in any combination, like mesh material 2D, mesh 2D material, material 2D mesh. I guess material 2D mesh doesn't really make sense, but like, not my favorite. I'm gonna forget that a whole bunch. So cargo run example, Voronezh, and this is just a panning version of the Voronezh example. If I remember correctly, this is just the UV coordinates being translated by the globals. It also lerps between the configurations. So Voronezh has basically like 2 0 to 1 configurations, and having them both at 0 0 or 1 1 or 0 1 or 1 0 gives slightly different output, but it's all basically a grid. So you can kind of see the grid deforming as those variables change in this example, which is very cool. So that's good. And then pristine grid is our next one. Looks like we have camera 3D bundle and a couple of material meshes. So very straightforward for us. And I've literally already forgotten which way to type this. Material 3D. I'm never going to remember mesh material 3D. I don't know. I can just feel it. It's not going to stick in my brain at all. Mesh 3D. And then we've got a sphere, and then we've got the camera 3D bundle. Camera 3D default with a transform that is also a component. I have to say, I do like getting rid of all the defaults. This does look significantly better when I'm reading it. Default obviously still exists. For example, for this pristine grid material, there are more settings that I can set. But for spawning stuff in, I am curious about how we're going to teach this, because I guess you have to teach people to go back to the docs, but people don't read docs. So like, if I say this is a camera 3D default and I say go read the camera 3D docs for figuring out what the other like settings are, like this is not terribly useful because it's not what most people want to change. So then what do? Hopefully it's documented here, but it doesn't really say it here. So maybe I need to make a PR to change that. Because this is usually the stuff you want to change, right? Camera HDR. So you just need to kind of know this exists if you want to enable HDR. Which I guess is the same way that a lot of things work. Like you read the examples, you figure out things exist and whatnot. But I'm curious. I'm curious as to how that's going to develop over time. So let's run the pristine grid example here. So this pristine grid is, man, I forget their name. It's like Ben Golub, maybe something like that. This actually probably doesn't show it off well enough. Now that I think about how dark these colors are, maybe I should change one of these colors. What am I using? Mesh 3D Slate 950 for the floor. This is for the sphere. Did we see a sphere? Is there a sphere here? There's no, I don't think there's a sphere there. Did I mess up? Mesh 3D sphere. Transform. Let's get rid of the floor for a second. I don't think it's either very, very, very small or not there. So sphere. We'll just make it kind of big. Still not there. Let's see, what did I do? Mesh 3D meshes, mesh from plane default mesh size. Camera is at slightly back. Warnings for the assets folder. Mesh 3D, meshes add, mesh from, meshes add. Sphere. I guess that's technically a difference, but that shouldn't actually make a difference, you know? If it does, I would be very surprised. That's interesting. What if I make it a plane? Just copy what I have up here for a second. Is it the mesh that's the issue or the material that's the issue? I don't think it's the material. I think it's the way that I'm generating the sphere. So mesh from plane 3D default mesh size subdivisions, right? Mesh add sphere radius 1 mesh UV. Let's go look at the sphere default mesh UV. That feels very like that's just changing the number of UV basically coordinates. Why does that work? Is 1 1 like just horribly suboptimal for that? I don't know why I had it at 1 1. At 1.11 did work. That's so strange. I feel like 1 might be degenerate. Yeah. That's hilarious though. I feel like I don't know. Why did 1 1 used to work? That feels really degenerate in terms of the geometry. This is hilarious though, looking at it like this. Okay, so that's fine. I was using degenerate numbers. I don't know. I don't know if there's value in that being any different. But you can see that the grid works on a sphere, it works on a plane. Let's change the color here to be green 400. Yeah. I feel like showing it rotating is not necessarily the best option either, but I also probably should have put a different grid next to it to show what the actual effect is. Because realistically, it's the effect in the distance. That's a very dark demo. Yeah. The colors there need to change 100%. Also, the colors on the sphere itself or on the cells are just black totally. But the idea is that this grid doesn't have like a moire. I don't never know how to say that. MOIRE in the distance. Which is very cool. So that is our shader lib upgraded. Let's see, do I have the Voronoi custom material pristine grid? That's the material shaders pristine grid. So that is from this specifically. Moire. 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 But yeah, you can see here where like in the distance this gets really muddy. And then if you look back at I guess like their final example. It does a little bit better. Okay, so pre-pass stuff. Pre-pass debug has an example. This is a query for handle. So this is one of the other changes that's going to happen in 0.15, and that's that handles are no longer components. Like sum total are no longer components. So let's do... We're going to have to get rid of the resources here. So we're just going to have to rerun this a couple of times to see all of the different variations. Wait, what? What about materials? Handles, you mean? Handles are no longer components in 0.15. Or you mean what about materials in terms of like how should you use materials? Which I have an example of because we just did. Basically, the TLDR is that everything's moving to new types. So instead of having a handle to a standard material, you'll have a mesh material 3D that wraps the handle to a standard material. The idea here being that there's kind of like two thought camps when it comes to data on entities. One camp is kind of saying, hey, these things should just be data and have no more than that attached to them. In which case, handle standard material would make sense, or like a handle to a mesh would make sense. And then there's another camp that is kind of saying like components are inherently related to behavior. So for example, if you were going to render a mesh 3D, right? You can render a mesh 3D in multiple different kinds of ways. It doesn't necessarily need to have a default material, et cetera, et cetera. So new typing the mesh to give it some intention around what it's supposed to do is kind of the approach that's becoming Bevy's approach, or has been Bevy's approach, but like handle was weird. So like for a navigation mesh or something like that, you could theoretically have a different new type. Again, those conversations aren't like fully fleshed out yet, but yeah, I could definitely hear both arguments. I don't think either of them are inherently wrong. I also am not representing them in their full capacity, is the other thing that I'll say, right? Like the idea that they should just be data and that systems should like operate on just data. But then the questions come up around like, how do you know that a handle to a mesh was meant to be used as a nav mesh and not a, you know, like renderable mesh? And you can't really do that by just querying for the mesh. You have to query for other stuff, which means that somebody could write a system that queries for mesh 3Ds or something like that, not knowing that you don't want your nav mesh rendered, and it would operate on the nav mesh. So I think that I lean on the side of like components as APIs. Components are inherently tied to behavior. But we'll see how it shakes out long term. I think I agree with you though. I could hear the argument on both sides. Archetypes, collections of components are more related to behavior. Different behavior and some components are present or not, but I guess that is just a layer of indirection. Is if. Different behavior if some components are present or not. Yeah. Oh, you're not familiar with new typing. New typing is, yeah. So new typing is you have something, right? You have like an F32, right? So if you put an F32 onto a component, what does that, or onto an entity, what does that mean? If F32 implemented component for whatever reason, what would it mean for that to go onto a component? That's the conversation that's happening. And new types specifically are like struct, let's say speed with an F32 inside of it. So you end up with this new type that is literally just an F32, except it is statically differentiable as an F32 that represents speed. Right. And then Bevy has some nice derives for you to make this easier because this is so common in Bevy's ecosystem. So if you do derive deref and deref mute, then you can treat this effectively as an F32 when you're using it, more or less, and you don't have to do like .0 instead. Yeah, so you're basically like new typing in F32. That's the idea, right? But it's still an F32. So like theoretically, you could derive, you know, add and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera here, because it's just an F32. But you want it statically differentiable as being like speed instead of just some random F32. Which then allows you to like write functions that take in a speed, which is, you know, self-documenting code. That's really nice. And it also would allow you to do things like use an F32 as an argument to that function, but knowing explicitly that you have to make it speed to pass it in. And there's fancier things you can do and whatnot, but that's the idea. The idea is that you just have one type and you wrap it in basically not a unit struct, but a single element tuple struct. Argument ad absurdum. If data was only data, then health would be stored as an I32 component and no one would know what it was for. It could be. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's that absurd, though. Like, if you put an F32 onto an entity, what does it mean? Like, what can you do with that F32 or I32 or whatever, right? And you can only have one of them, too, right? So you can only have one F32 on an entity or one I32 on an entity. So then what do you use it for? What does it represent? And I guess you could say, like, maybe there are some good definitions for things like that. Maybe having them just be the thing is useful ergonomically in some cases, but basically you would never be able to rely on what that was except by convention. So this is a mesh 3D. Mesh 3D. I think one of the interesting things about this example, or this piece of thing in particular, oh god, I already forgot which way to write this again. Mesh material 3D. Okay. What was I gonna say before I forgot what I was doing? Mesh 3D, material mesh 3D. Oh, one of the interesting things about this example in particular is we're basically just drawing a quad on the front of the screen. And I think there's a full screen shader for a vertex shader inside of Bevy right now. And I think we could make use of that in this and not have to spawn a full quad because it could basically do it itself. So let's get rid of some of these Bevy Inspector eGUI things because I don't think it has a main branch yet. And even if it did, I don't know that I want to use it. So this query for the prepass output material no longer works. The material handle. Oh, we can use single here, which will be really fun. I think we're good other than that, though. Toggle prepass view. Yep. Okay. So this is no longer a handle here, like we were talking about. This is a mesh material 3D. I think this is the new query. Maybe not. Let's check. Maybe it's in here somewhere. Do we have a shader example? I think animate shader doesn't use external values anymore. That uses time. This is the pre-pass as it currently exists. I don't think they have the same query that I do, though. It is a mesh material 3D. Oh, okay. So the type is actually the type and not... Okay, so mesh material 3D's type argument is the type of the material. You don't have to specify handle there. That's cool. Makes it a little bit awkward in terms of reading that and figuring out what it is, but... So I think we can replace this with single as well, and then we don't actually need this. I haven't used single yet, though. So do we need to call a function on it? Because if we do, then that doesn't really help us. And that's a handle. So in materials, which is what, the assets database? Resmute assets. Yeah, asset ID. Let's see what the issue is here. Cargo run. What is this? Pre-pass. Oh, I'm in the shader utils, that's why. Oh, shader pre-pass. Oh, we're getting mute, so I need to actually make this. Okay, got it. So this would be single mute then, right? Or no, this would need to be... Why would the handle need to be mutable? What are we cooking today? We're upgrading some examples to 0.15 or Bevy 0.15, which is not out yet, just to be clear. We're upgrading to main effectively. So I haven't worked with single yet, and I think single's giving me some issues. I saw the PR for this go in, but so a system that provides yeah, like query single or single mute. Is there a single mute version of this? I don't think we need it to be mute. So material handle dot zero should give us the handle. That handle shouldn't need to be mutable. So what is the issue? Just that I'm trying to use it and move it. Okay, interesting. What do we have here? Shader prepass 68. Assets, prepass output material. Oh, where's STD materials? Oh, that's in the, okay. MSAA, I think, is a component now on a camera. So we can turn that off if we want to. Camera 3D, default for the example. And then transform is its own component. Default comes up. I hope these are the same. Bevy remote, where there'll be a first party networking crate. Bevy remote should be BRP, the Bevy remote protocol. That is a, actually, I could probably just run it here. Let's do that after we do the example. Anyway, the Bevy remote protocol is very interesting. It's a way that you can actually access the state of a running Bevy game. Yada, yada, yada. So 14880 implements basically an API plugin that will let you run curl against a running Bevy app and return components and list entities and mutate things and spawn stuff and things like that. That's what Bevy remote is. Bevy remote is not it's not like Lightyear or something like that. I guess PBR bundle is fully deprecated then, huh? Interesting. Luckily, Rust Analyzer coming to save my day, remembering which way to spell that. And then here we need to finish this off here, and then this transform goes away, default, and then we need a starting paren. Oh, and we've got more. It'll be used for things like blenvy. Yeah, it'll be used for the editor. Yeah, the Bevy editor specifically needs BRP. The mythical Bevy editor that is constantly being worked on. We still got another couple months or so before 0.5. No, we don't. I love your optimism though. We've got if I had to guess, I would say release candidate next week. Followed by maybe like 3 weeks or so of release candidates and then a release after that. These are all estimates, and they're only my estimates, so don't take them as, you know, commitments from the project or whatever. But we definitely do not have until the end of the year. Is this Rust Rover? No, it's VS Code. Also, the global replace isn't going to help me at all. The replacement here, partially I'm doing so that I understand what the changes are. So doing a global find and replace doesn't actually help me do that. And B, the changes being made here require the ability to regex inside of them and wrap different things and different new types and stuff like that. So doing it manually for me is the point currently. And I don't use like fancy find and replace tools and stuff. Specifically because if I did that, I would still be using Emacs and you wouldn't even be noticing what keys I was typing. So it's significantly harder for people to follow if I use advanced tools. You're building Bevy chests. Oh my god, it's so hard. Completely new at Rust and game dev. Nice. Well, if you have any questions about Rust and game dev related to your Bevy chest stuff, feel free to ask. Is that this one? I guess there's a couple of them at this point. I feel like chess is a really popular game because it has such like such a culture of having engines built for it and stuff. It's really, really, really well studied, is what I'll say. Okay, let's see if this runs. Okay, it runs. Too many textures in mesh pipeline view layout. This might cause you to hit WGPU limits. I don't think I have any textures of my own. I guess technically we don't need the motion vectors. But that's only an issue for WASM too. So I am going to leave these in. Effectively, each of these is another texture, which can cause issues. I'm going to leave them in though and assume that it'll get fixed in the engine. Hey, you gave me advice on Bevy Snake a little bit ago. Have your beta working version now? Do you mind if I link the GitHub code? You will not be able to link the GitHub code in YouTube chat, specifically because YouTube is going to moderate you out and I will never see it. But if you want to post your version of Snake, you can come into the Discord, which I think... I never started the bot. I just realized. Let's see, integrations. I don't even know if my bot is connected. Stream elements, log out. Would be nice if this was easier to use, dang. Oh, there we go. YouTube. Looks like it should be working. See if it works. Hey, it is working. Yeah, if you want to post your snake game in the Discord, I would love to take a look. But YouTube will auto moderate it out. Okay, so we have defaults for our pre-pass settings. Which lives in the code and the lib. Which we've implemented default for. And I'll just modify for the moment. We're using F32s effectively to represent Booleans inside of this struct, or we are using F32s inside of the shader anyway, not inside of the struct. So we should be able to run this again, and this should show depth. Typically, this is done through Bevy Inspector eGUI. I wonder if I should change that, though. Bevy Inspector eGUI not having a 0.15 release is then the issue there. Bye, Hukasu. It blocked your post with your link to GitHub. It might be because you joined and then immediately... Let me see if I can approve it. It's weird that it doesn't let me just, like, pass the message through. I do see the link, though. I wish it showed me... There you go. Do you know how to query search for components in a large set of entities? Like, does it select filter with first? I'm not sure what you mean, Miner. How does query filter items when setting it up in systems? You saw somewhere Booleans were passed to the shader as all flags were amalgamated into a single bit set. What you saw was the backface culling. Is this related? This is not related. What you saw was... what's that flags thing called? I know exactly what you're talking about. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. It's all the shader def stuff. Of course, the source code is not working on docs.rs. But yes, there's a whole bunch of flags for a whole bunch of different things. There's also shader defs, which are also flags. Well, I can't remember the name of the thing that you're thinking of, though. Why can't I think of it? But yes, there are bit sets being used. What you saw was the backface culling, so the cull mode, then? I think cull mode is part of the standard material. I don't think it's used in those. I'm completely blanking on what the collection for the bit set is. Maybe if I look for the UV0 stuff, it'll show me. Oh, Bevy mod outline. Let me go look at Bevy mod outline so I just know what you're talking about then. Cull mode can be set in the specialized function if you override with a custom material. So you don't actually need to use all of that stuff. Night, Roberto. Have a good one. Yeah, they don't even use, oh, the keys, the material mesh keys. Is that what it is? The pipeline keys. There we go. Like this. This is what you're thinking of. These are shader defs, if I remember correctly. Of course, we can't look at the source code. This is what you were seeing. And these flags get passed in. But you don't need to use this in general. This is just an optimized way to set some data and stuff. If you have 1 million of X component entities and 5 of Y components, does query X, Y, query Y, X any different? I don't think so. Also, it doesn't do anything until you iterate over it. So you're only going to get 5 Y components there, and when you iterate over it, that's when the expense is. You needed to introduce an ugly hack for the outline to not cull backface. It worked, but you don't know how or why. Interesting. You needed to do that inside of the Bevy mod outline, or you needed to do that in general? Because I have a cull mode example in here. Let's go shield depth. So this is all you need to do if you have a special material. This is the material implementation for that material. So if you have a material that gives you, yeah, okay, you need to modify Bevy mod outline. So I don't know specifically what Bevy mod outline is doing, but I do know that in general, if you're using the material trait, you can implement it, and if you use specialize, you can just set the cull mode, and you don't need to deal with any of the other stuff. Okay, so I think the shader prepass is the only way that I have to control this. The Bevy GUI stuff, because that would not be great. I should probably have another way to control this. Okay, it's supposed to be each time you press space. So space is not working for that, which is really interesting. Let's take a look at the shader prepass example in the Bevy repo. So we've got PBR plugin, a material plugin, prepass output material. It's very similar. Yada yada. This prepass crate that I use in this repo is effectively just a crateized version of this example. So they're doing UI text writer stuff. I think I skipped actually showing that outside of eGUI. Yeah. So my next guess is that the shader actually is not operating correctly. There are no WGPU warnings. So our next attempt is to look at shaders, to look at the prepass shader. Make sure nothing here changed. Prepass utils. I think I'm using prepass utils. If I'm not, I should be. Yeah. So this is the same. Let me think about whether this mesh is actually rendering or not. That'll be the second time that I've hit that, if that's the case. So plane, cuboid, cuboid, plane, cuboid. Okay, so we need... I don't think this is a mesh 3D. I think this is a mesh 2D. I think that's the thing that's tripping me up quite a bit, actually. The outline color can be changed, but the material shader stuff is only internal to the mod. Interesting. So they've kind of hidden that away. I guess that makes sense. Because if they wanted you to configure it, they would put it on the material, and then you could access that and specialize. So is this supposed to be a 2D mesh then? Are they using the... They're not using the full screen vertex shader. They are using a 3D quad. Same thing, same setup. I guess the next option is make sure that this is running at all. It is, which is good. So let's change this to immediately have a show depth of 1 with defaults for everything else. And this should spawn directly into the depth view. And if it doesn't, something's wrong. So the question is, what's wrong at this point? The quad is over the screen. I guess show depth could be not applying for some reason. Let's return a different color. So we don't make it to show depth, which is really interesting. Is my bind group wrong? I should get a warning if it's wrong, though. Looks the same there. Pre-pass utils, forward IO. I guess, are we even making it here? I don't think so. I don't think we're making it into this section, which feels really weird. Hmm. That's interesting. Are we not passing that data incorrectly? Let's go to lib. Let's go show prepass settings. Show prepass settings. Show depth 1. Mesh material 3D. Not shadowcaster. Uniform. I don't think any of that has changed. Is the way that I'm applying depth to the camera wrong? Camera 3D default transform. What are we doing? Camera 3D default transform. I guess the only other thing is that they have MSAA off in their example. That would be really awkward if that were the thing, though. Let's go look for toggle in lib and make sure this is running. So I don't implement debug on this. That was silly. Let's do debug. I feel like I need to raise my AC unit up higher in the room. Okay, so this actually isn't even triggering that. I bet you I broke it with single. Let's go back to query for a second. Query, material mesh 3D, yada yada, material handle. Well, that's not true. Let's do. Now I'm just a little bit confused in general. This should be running. Cool. So that is running. Is changed. Doesn't seem to be actually checking to see if this is changed. They aren't doing resource on change. They're doing on press. I'm choosing to set this resource. which means in here, am I not setting it in here? Prepass settings on material, prepass settings. Prepass settings changes as a resource, not when you hit space, but only when you do Bevy Inspector eGUI, that's why. That's because this comment is wrong. Because I hooked it up only to eGUI. Okay. That is the other. Okay. Let's do, or we can just steal this from them actually. If settings got changed or key code dot, I guess we're going with key code in the examples now. Just pressed key code space, then we debug. That was silly. I left in a comment that said the code operated in a way that it did not operate. Okay, that's still not our actual issue, but at least now that this is changing and running. And we can go back to single after this, I think. Right. So I'll be a little bit, I guess, cheeky here then. If space pressed, then I'll come back and clean this up at some point. From none to depth, from depth to normals, from normals to motion vectors, from motion vectors to none. And the next view then, where's our settings.show equals next view? That means this needs to be mutable now. This should really go in a separate system if I'm thinking about how I would actually write this. But for the moment, I just want it to test to see if this works or not. There we go. Now we are showing. I just forgot what I wrote in terms of code. Let that be a lesson for y'all to document your stuff correctly. Okay, there's depth, there's normals, there's motion vectors, which we have none of because this cube isn't rotating technically. Okay, that is that. Should we pull in prepass utils and shorten this a little bit? Maybe. I feel like I get a little bit nervous whenever I shorten function calls like that, especially in WGSL specifically. Okay, that's fine. This can go. And then I think that's everything for the crates. Get checkout be 0.15, I guess. Libs work in 0.15. And then I'll leave this up as a pull request until 0.15 actually gets an RC. Cool. So let's do at least one of these examples here. Which one should we actually do first? Which ones did we have enabled before? We had the Fresnel. I think the only difference with the Fresnel is going to be failed to parse manifest. I think the only thing with the Fresnel is going to be this camera that I was using. And then some of the basic stuff that we looked at earlier. So I'm probably going to move to a different camera plugin, but for now we'll just comment this out. We need to make the same, this is Mesh 3D, the same changes that we made earlier. So Mesh 3D for meshes, transform just a component now. We'll open the curly brace there, or not the curly brace, but let's see if I can remember this. Mesh material 3D. Get rid of that, replace this. And then we do the same thing for these. Looks like there's just a couple of changes to make. We'll get rid of that camera. This will become default. And then this is Mesh 3D. This is transform. This is Mesh material 3D. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get a paren back up here. And then directional light probably just becomes directional light. Maybe with a default. I forget if it was point light with a default or not. I think it was. I don't know why I thought of this, but I just thought of the penguin in Super Mario 64. Because why wouldn't I? That's the right thing to be thinking about right now, right? Okay, so I would be able to move this around if we had the camera plug-in, but otherwise this looks correct, which is wonderful. This is a demo of the Fresnel effect, which I used in a video at one point. Should probably redo that video at some point. But this demo hasn't substantially changed, though. I think this is the same demo that I wrote for that video. Okay, so Fresnel effect upgraded. Let's get rid of, oh, that's not what I meant to do. Let's get rid of a bunch of those tabs. What was the other one that we already had enabled? Raymarch Sphere. I don't think this is going to be that difficult of an upgrade either. This is going to be basically the same thing. It'll be really nice if this is kind of the upgrade experience for most people. I think it'll be a little bit like mesh material 3D. I think it's a little bit awkward because it's not clear why these changes are being made at the moment. So I think when we do the release, that's something that will need to be kind of expanded on. What is the issue here? Oh, it's a rectangle. Is that actually going to be the issue? That would be sweet. Sick. And then all the logic for this one runs inside of the shader because it's a Raymarsh sphere. So just some SDF action going on, which is very cool. SDFs are really fun. But I don't think we have any issues with the shaders. The shader stuff didn't update that much this. I need to turn WGSL Analyzer off. Shader stuff didn't update that all that much. This is also like quite the complicated SDF compared to what it could be. So I might simplify that at some point. What else is interesting in here? 8-way sprites might be a good one to do next. I know this relies on Bevy asset loader. Maybe we'll hold this off. Maybe we'll hold off until the release candidate for this one. Bevy asset loader and Leafwing. Hey, what are you working on? I am upgrading some Bevy examples that I have, like this Raymarsh SDF sphere, to Bevy 0.15. Bevy 0.15 is not out yet. It's important to note. We also just did this for now demo. Bevy 0.15 is still only on the main branch. So there's a release candidate that's going to come out, but I'm kind of getting ahead of the curve on this one. Partially because I want to know what the upgrade's going to be like for people before it actually has to happen. So that I can tell people what it's like. So do we do shield with depth next? I think that's a fun one. We have Bevy asset loader in this one too, though. Any breaking changes yet? I guess technically yes. Like APIs have changed. Nothing that is like, so far, nothing that is extremely serious. But the required components changes are definitely 100% like will require upgrades. I don't know what kind of breaking you're talking about, right? So instead of doing a mesh material bundle for these, this changes into a new type wrapper for mesh 2D for the mesh, and then mesh material 2D for the material. And then you can add transforms and whatever. Render world extraction is very different now. Yes. Most people aren't doing interesting things with the render world though. Right. I assume that if people are doing interesting things with the render world and that the extraction is going to affect them, that they probably also aren't asking me if there are breaking changes, you know? Due to the nature of like how deep you have to get in to actually do stuff at lower levels. Also, hello. One issue you ran into is that the external plugins you use might be lagging. How do you usually counter that? What do you mean by lagging? Like lagging behind in terms of Bevy version, or by lagging they mean they take the time to update to the latest version. Yeah, so If you asked me what I would do the upgrade, uh, and PR it to them. I know that's not really an option for everybody. I think that depending on open source work is kind of a trade-off in many respects. It depends on it depends on how comfortable you are actually working on the code, right? So like that was the case for Bevy ECS tile map at one point, and like 0.13 didn't really get a release. So for 0.14, I went and I did the migration for them and then PR'd it, and now I maintain the project with them. Which I just remembered I have to put up the 0.14 GitHub tag. So that's an option, right? Another option is if you don't feel comfortable waiting for them to update, stay on old versions. There's nothing wrong with being on old versions, right? I know that Foresight is usually like 2 Bevy versions behind, and they're like production Bevy users. So there's nothing wrong with that, right? I guess the other thing is if you really want to be on the latest Bevy release all the time, you're going to have to either depend on libraries that really care about being compatible with the very latest, or you have to do it. And I think more often than not, it all ends up in the same place. Eventually, you have to do it. Most people who are doing open source work are doing it in their free time. I obviously also don't know which library you're talking about. So it really depends, I think. There may be competitors for that library or for that crate as well that do update. And if that's important to you, if being, if they're on 0.13 right now and being on 0.14 right now is really important for you, you either have to use a different crate or you have to upgrade it yourself. There's nothing you can do to like force somebody to do the work to migrate, So that's just kind of like the unfortunate reality, I guess. I wouldn't really call it unfortunate either, but I guess the unfortunate part is that people don't have as much income to maintain the open source software as they would be nice. It would be really nice if people like could make a living off of their open source projects, but that's not true for everybody. Okay, so we've got Bevy Asset Loader pretty deeply in here. I don't think Bevy Asset Loader is tracking main at the moment. Sometimes they do, especially around release time. Yeah, 3 months ago. So last release was the last main update. My guess is that they wait until the release candidate. I don't think there were a lot of loader changes, so it might be an easy upgrade. I don't know that offhand though. Bevy Inspector eGUI inside of CubeWave. I think this one can upgrade. This one's not terribly complicated. We do need to get rid of Bevy Inspector eGUI. We can automatically bump itertools. Itertools basically never breaks. And then I've already disabled Bevy Inspector eGUI in this one, so let's do. Why is that still there? There we go. Cargo toml, CubeWave. I want to make these examples a little bit more structured, a little bit more of like a, I don't want to say linear, but right now it is just kind of a dump of things that I've done over the years at this point. And I think it could be much more useful than that. think we'll from size this for cube size. Interesting that that's an issue. Why is that an issue? Oh, this is, no, that's not deprecated. RGB is deprecated. That's because it takes a VEC3. Okay, so then we've got some attribute color stuff, mesh handles, material mesh bundle, mesh 2D, or mesh 3D, sorry. Goes here. This material is also going to be a mesh material 3D. Get our transform in here. And then not Shadowcaster will not insert. We'll just get that in there. Use our tuples. Slam an upgrade into that color specification as we drive by. Let's see. Tuple, camera 3D default, transform fine. Is projection its own component now? That's an interesting question. Where is DevDocs? Let's see. Let's take a look at camera first. I didn't quite look at the camera required components PR. So it looks like we've got viewport, so no projection here. Is projection completely separate now? That's really interesting. Scale is no longer a thing. So I'm going to comment that out. We're going to have to fix that. Default no longer works for orthographic projection because orthographic projection has been split into 2D and 3D. Orthographic projection. And then it's like default 2D and default 3D. And that I think is actually a really good change because setting the defaults between, specifically setting the orthographic projection in 2D, required also setting the near and far clipping planes. And I think that people don't know what clipping planes are. So significantly better to not have to make people deal with that. Oh wow, is this example older than I think it is? Uniform color. Yeah, it is older than I think it is. Dang. Let's do this. It's always nice when you can just do, hey, implement this for me, Rust Analyzer, even if there's so many different ways to handle that. All right, let's grab this, throw some debug information in here. This was not particularly important in terms of like the specialized function and what it's doing. It just labels it. Okay, so cube material as bind group type path. I don't remember offhand what the correct incantation of material derives is. Is it asset type path as bind group clone? Asset type path. That's the same list of stuff. Is there a different issue? shader type is not implemented for color. Ah, right, because color, it's not color anymore. It's linear sRGBA. So linear sRGB. Linear RGBA. Which is another good change, honestly. So cube material then is going to get set with the wrong stuff. This is not going to be color. This is sRGBA hex. Unwrap into. This color sRGBA, I guess like 2 linear would work here. And then type UUID goes away, which was old. Why is that in here? And then this should run and it should be really small. Interesting that we have a shader issue. Bevy render instance index not found. I don't remember what went into this shader in the first place. This looks pretty basic in terms of fragment shader. And this looks a little bit like a copy of the regular vertex shader with a couple modifications. So my guess is that something in the default vertex shader changed and that I need to go look that up. Currently, it's telling me that instance index is not found. Which I think this example might not have been updated for the last version. So let's go take a look at what is going on these days. Great. PBR, source, render. Mesh view types, mesh bindings, mesh. Mesh? Mesh isn't really what I want, is it? I don't think so. This is a default vertex shader for a mesh. This get world from local is the thing that we were just looking at that's causing us an issue right now, because those function names changed in 0.14. And I think that this example wasn't updated for that. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of extra stuff here that we might not need, especially for this demo. We don't have morph targets, so we won't need to deal with any of that. So in that case, that random accidental paste up there doesn't want to be there. In that case, we'll do, maybe comment that out for a moment. We'll put this in here. This is going to be very wide because I don't have any formatting for WGSL, unfortunately. So morph vertex is not what we're going to use because we don't have any morph targets. So I'm just going to get rid of some of this stuff. It's not skinned. I'm going to leave the comment there about the WGPU bug. Vertex normals, again, not skinned. I mean, on one hand, I want to keep it as close to the default as possible because it makes it easier to update. And on the other hand, there's just so much of this code that isn't necessary for such a simple example. Like in our case, we're never going to have UVs stored in a different channel. So like I never even need this. And I know the UVs are always going to be there, so I could do this, right? That said, if anything does go wrong, then those things will, you know, crash if I try to change this at all. Yeah, get instance index was removed in 0.14. Yeah, that makes sense. I think this is an example from 0.13 at the latest. We also don't use the tangents at all. We don't have vertex colors. It's hilarious to see this repeatedly pop up. I should probably have a better idea of what this bug is. HLSL out. Instance index workaround doesn't always get applied. When calling draw indexed, the workarounds don't get applied if the struct containing gets rebinded as a var. Oh. Okay. Wonderful. That's not fun. No progress on this since 2023. Cool. Okay, we don't do visibility ranges in this example either, so we don't need that. We don't need vertex colors because we don't have vertex colors. We actually don't even use tangents. It's hilarious to me that like if def vertex positions, but I know I get it. I don't think we use the normals. We do use the normals. So in that case, this is then just some arbitrary logic smacked in the middle of the vertex shader. So position greater than 0, set position, otherwise, world position with the new position. So I guess technically this code should only run if there are vertex positions, which there are always going to be in this demo. And then this doesn't take vertex position because we're modifying it. And this should be enough for this to just work because there, again, isn't really... I hope the weasel stuff works out because it feels like I shouldn't need to do so much replication of the vertex shader. But we'll see. We also aren't using that. So I think that's good. I think that's enough. And I can kind of go back in and clean it up even more later. I missed an if. Which one? 27? 27. That's fine. And then I missed a closing paren. Man, I'm really just deleting stuff willy-nilly, aren't I? 29. Good. Good. This. Did I delete the... Morph targets, skin, vertex normals. Yes, I did. Why did I delete that? When did I delete that? downsides of working with WGSL. Globals.time not in. Okay, where's globals coming from for this? This is 3D, so we are good to bring back. I think it moved. I think it's not there anymore. Globals was in the water shader example. Globals comes in from Bevy render globals now. Which I think actually that's not what I want, if I remember correctly, offhand. Yeah, because they bind this themselves, and I think we already have it bound, so we don't actually want it from here. But I forget where we want it from. Let's do globals. Not Bevy render. Why am I in Bevy render? View, batching, camera, diagnostic, mesh, primitives, render. I don't think it's here. I think I want it in PBR. Let's do this. Let's see what pulls in Bevy render globals instead. Mesh 2D view types, UI material, UI texture slice, Mesh 2D, core pipeline motion blur is just rebinding it. Wow, GitHub search is really awful, isn't it? Okay, well, I guess I'll go into the crates myself then. PBR, source, render, and then what do I think has it? It's not in types, right? Types is just mesh stuff. Bindings somewhere. Mesh bindings. No, that's the RS file. Why did I click on that? Yada, yada, yada. Forward.io probably doesn't have it. The organization of this definitely doesn't mesh well with my head. But I think that that's true for everybody. Mesh functions, mesh types, mesh view bindings. That's still the Rust file. Why do I keep doing that? Mesh view bindings, globals. Globals, mesh view bindings. Perfect. Conflict with other resource. Okay, so it's not that. Because I brought in the bindings again, effectively. So I don't need mesh view bindings. Where do I need to get this from? I don't want to bind it myself. Mesh view bindings is used probably in what? Mesh bindings, mesh. This has got to be. I feel like it has to be in one of the examples, but the way we have different imports for different things really makes it not particularly understandable for me. Let's see. Assets, we'll go to the animate shader example. I think that uses mesh view bindings globals from Bevy PBR. Mesh view bindings globals. Okay. But that's pulling in the bindings, which is an issue. Oh, this actually, I don't think that's an issue with the globals. That's an issue with entry point at vertex is invalid because our material is at group 1 binding 0. Okay, that is good because if you can see the little speck of dust in the middle there, that's what that's what we're looking for. So if I go through to our projection, we need to scale it way down. And I don't know what the equivalent here is going to be. I guess I could do fixed horizontal. Just pick a new approach. Sick. That is way too close. So I don't know how big this actually is. My original implementation of this was so long ago. Okay, we need maybe 20 pixels. I think that's reasonable. Could probably be a little bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. And then I really need to clean that code up. But it is working again, which is nice. So overall, migration is not going terribly so far. The Bevy ECS tile map migration is far worse than this. Okay, so we've got the cube wave, we've got Fresnel effect. I know the compute 3D one is particularly old at this point. The candy cane I would love to get running and also move to storage buffers. How much time do we have here? Okay, I think we might have time to do that. Because the candy cane is like something that you can technically configure. And the way that I have it being configured right now is, let's see if I remember correctly. I think I have different materials for different amounts of stripes. Yeah. So like I just hard code up to 4 stripes in here. Which is just like, I don't know, kind of annoying. let's see, the lib, we have a stripe, we have some older as bind group stuff. Oh, right, okay. This was also a standard material extension before we had standard material extensions. So this will get a lot cleaner, which will be nice. And get rid of the bit flags. God, it is nice that the standard material extension exists. Maintaining a whole separate implementation of the standard material was quite a bit of code. Okay, and then the UI button shader is probably pretty easy. I don't remember this having anything in particular that was particularly intense about it. I think it's just a regular, like most of the work is done in the shader. Bevy asset loader though. What are we using Bevy asset loader for? Oh, it's because I didn't take the other one out. 8-way sprites is not ready to come in yet. So this will be good for some camera 2D default. This is a material node bundle. What did material node bundles become? Did this not go in yet? I guess this didn't go in yet. Okay, so maybe we don't do the UI stuff. I think there's probably still a PR. Sprite went in, required components, text style. Text ghost node. Maybe there isn't a PR open yet. Scenes, lights, visibility. I think UI hasn't made it in yet. That's the Bevy CLI MVP. Let's do, oh, dang. I don't want to log in right now. Okay, cool. It's all public. Nice. I don't find HackMD particularly usable. But it's what everybody has chosen to use, so. So this is what it will look like. But it doesn't look like this has had a PR attached to it yet. So this is what? UI material handle. Probably just a wrapper, right? Later, Ryan. Thanks for hanging out. with the knowledge that this will have to get updated anyway. Linear sRGB or linear, this has a white on it. Yeah, cool. Let's do the linear RGB white. Linear RGB a white. New color, color HSL. I think this is just going to be 2 linear, right? Or maybe not. This is color, custom UI material. Variant not found in Bevy Prelude color. Expected Vec 4. I changed this already. No, I changed it in one of them and not the other. Okay. Color RGBA linear. This is just going to be linear RGBA. Well, that's not what I want. Dot into. And then when the UI changes actually come through, then we'll do another update here. And that's cool. I don't know how useful this is as an actual health indicator, but it's kind of fun to draw like an SDF shape and be able to fill it up or drain it down. I think realistically, the only way this could be used is if it was like full half empty. Thanks. The slosh was what I was going for. The original intent was slosh, and then I thought circle wasn't good enough, I guess. I don't know why I didn't think it was good enough. So I did a heart instead. But it's just an SDF, so it can be any shape, actually. Again, I don't know how useful that shader actually is for like a production app, like for health readability, but it is a nice effect. I think that that's probably a reasonable amount to update for the moment. I think that maybe the dissolve shader is also a good one. There's no, why do I have bit flags in here? Oh, because it was a standard material. Would be cool for a cartoonish style game. Yeah, maybe. I still think that you could only really read like full health and half health or empty. I don't think you could read many more like levels in between. I think you get 3 max. Okay, so is this actually, no, I changed it to an extension. Okay, cool. Love that. Love that for me. Past Chris was nice and actually did the upgrade. So this is supposed to look something like this. I should probably make a better demo for that too at some point. Like it's fine to show it off. It was one of my earlier Bevy, why is that an issue? It was one of my earlier Bevy shaders, I guess you could call it. Okay, material mesh 3D, same kind of stuff. Some UV shape things need to get updated. Plane needs to get updated. Key codes need to get updated. Colors need to get updated. This looks like a reasonable upgrade to me. This is sRGBA hex now, right? Or is it just sRGB? I think this asset plugin changed. Is that still the way that that runs? The asset plugin changed a number of times, so wouldn't surprise me. We have a UV sphere in our other example. It's not UV sphere anymore. It's just like sphere default like mesh.uv. What was it? 32 and 18 in the other example that we looked at. Doesn't really matter to us. I don't think we need mesh from if we call .mesh either. I think this is just a mesh. Yeah. I want to get into the curves work at some point too. I don't have anything that like is a demo that I need to upgrade that uses curves currently. But a lot of the new or not the transform. That's why I'm looking at the transform. A lot of the new animation stuff is really interesting. Okay, all of this. One too close. Yeah, additive blending made it in and animation events made it in. So I don't know who's been around since I was working on the 2D isometric game. But the way that we coded animation events for that game was very custom and based on kind of like the frame times and stuff like that. And that is built in now. So we can trigger animation events based on time offsets in animation clips, which is really, really cool. Much nicer. PBR bundle is gone. This is going to be a mesh 3D. That plane is also going to need an update, but I'll leave that for a second. Mesh material 3D. Yeah, I don't know. I get the new types. I don't mind them at all. It does mean that I still have to type them every time though. Let's see, plane. What, default, maybe? Dot subdivisions? I don't even remember. We've got plane 3D default. Dot mesh dot size 10 I think is what we had here. Subdivisions don't matter to us in this example. It's just a ground plane as far as I remember anyway, so that's fine. Let's get rid of some of these walls, I guess, if they're not being used. No reason to keep commented code around when we have Git. Get rid of that. We have got our point light with a transform. What's wrong with the point light with the transform? It's got a key ID. And this is linear RGB. What does that actually need to be? Point light. Is a point light a color and not a linear color? Point light is a color. That's cool. So we could do like red 400 here then. We actually aren't pulling any of the tailwind stuff, so we pull that in. I want to get better about maintaining a lot of this kind of stuff during the release cycle, or not the release cycle, but during the development cycle. I feel like it would be significantly easier to maintain over time. Let's see, the radius of this is 1, so we need to set that. I want to do that for the workshops and stuff too. But that does also mean either maintaining like third-party depths like we were talking about earlier. Or using fewer of them. That seems like such a weird color to be using. Why am I using that? The emissive on a standard material currently is what? Linear RGBA. Oh, because it's not a freaking function. There we go. I don't know why I was writing it like that. Point lights. Why do I have so many point lights in this scene? It's not really relevant. So we're pulling colors out of the tailwind. I want to call it themes. It's not called themes. Color palette. I find them really easy to work with when I'm just doing quick stuff like this. So this is the same thing that we're going to write, so I'm just going to copy and paste it from above. And then this is going to be blue 400. And this is going to be RGB or linear RGBA. New. And then I think we're almost done with this upgrade. This directional light goes away. Transform. Default stuff. Semicolons. This is button input now. These are arrow up, arrow down, arrow, whatever. And then this should work, I think. Unless there's shader issues. Shader issues always show up at runtime, which is one of the reasons I like having like bins in general. So somewhat yes, somewhat no. Apply normal mapping. Let's check it out. I think that's in the regular material, right? No, it's in the pre-pass. Okay, cool. So let's see if I remember what I wrote here. There's the flags stuff that we were talking about earlier. Material flags. This is... Yep. Basically, all of this pre-pass shader is just copy-pasted from the Bevy pre-BR pre-pass shader. Wonderful. Did I leave myself notes for what I updated at least? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we have... I'm double applying this. And I think I'm double applying this, if I remember correctly, because I wanted a color around the edge. So I needed to calculate the gap and also like the color distance from the edge. So this is all going to stay. And then I think this is just the fragment shader, right? Or not the fragment shader, sorry. This is the pre-pass. Which I think... should be easily findable for us. Crates, PBR, source, prepass, prepass.wgsl. This looks similar. Wow, Bevy's gotten a lot more features then. That's morph vertex, morph previous. That's vertex. Where's fragment? Here's fragment. Dang. I think this is going to be it. Yeah, here we go. Normal pre-pass. I think all of this is going to go and it's going to be fine. And this is going to come out and we'll just have out there and we'll get rid of some of these if defs because we are going to have this pre-pass fragment no matter what. I use front facing. So I'm going to keep that. But the rest of this can go. And I think that is fine. I think it's literally just a pre-pass extension in that sense. Seeing some issues with these lights. Unfortunately, we don't have that movable camera around, so we can't see some of the impact of the lights. Would love to fix those shadows. I wonder... Oh, somebody was asking how to do shadows like that too. I think it was Kukasu, actually. They're doing that like a magenta sprite shader replacement. I should have pointed them over here. Cool. I don't love the shadows in that example. I know there was some shadow work that went in. Box shadow. PCSS. That's what I was thinking of. To enable, fill in the soft shadow size value in directional point or spotlight. The shadow size value represents the size of the light and should be tuned as appropriate for your scene. Higher values, wider penumbra. Temporal shadow maps. Maybe I mess with shadows later. I was just thinking about, because if I update the shadows here, I don't want to just update it and be like, oh, look, PCSS looks nice. I want to update it and have a justification for why the settings are the way they are. So I want to spend more time understanding that. But it does run, so I'm counting that for now. Even if it still feels a little bit off, I think. There's got to be a better way to demo that behavior. Also, are we using the normal map? Let's see. Dissolve. See, the concrete came from, if I remember correctly, Megapixel. We have the normal map. We are currently hopefully using it. Yeah, we are using it. What else do we have? We have displacement as well. We have an EXR displacement. Nice. So where is parallax? Forget where to put this one in. Depth map? I think it's depth map. So instead of normal here, we want displacement. I don't feel like that made much of a difference, honestly. But maybe it just doesn't. What's the other option? I think it can handle EXR just by default. I was doing that with the meshlet stuff. Maybe it can't. Do I have to enable EXR? This is an error in Bevy render. Is it though? Is it an error in Bevy render or is it a misconfiguration by Chris? I think it's a misconfiguration by Chris. The EXR stuff was something that I was working with the meshlets rendering. I was outputting stuff from Gaia and using the, oh, what was I using for the EXR? I don't think it was the height map. I think it was the coloring. I don't remember offhand. But I think this is the last example that I want to update for today. I think when the RCs come out, I'm going to start doing workshop updates. So that'll be 2048 and Snake. And then I have a couple of other games that I want to update as well, which I could get started on. I think we have Asteroids. Yeah. So the Asteroids game was something we built on stream. Doing an upgrade to this and kind of using more Bevy native stuff would be very cool. I don't I think the only thing that I can think of that would be an issue would be the different colliders, but I think that would still work. The other problem is nobody likes doing UI. So if I put this up as a workshop, everybody would skip the ship selection screen. So if it's going to be a workshop, then it has to get reduced at least a little bit. What else do we have here? Oh, good. Our example popped up, but it didn't actually work. So image does not contain non-deep RGB channels. I vaguely remember seeing that, but I'm going to not use the EXR for now and come back to that at some point. Which I think that was the only change there, right? Dissolve shader. Cached. I think it's lock file and depth map. Yeah. So we'll just stash that. Cool. I want to get back to the WGPU on Bevy course. Oh man, I have so much stuff. Every time I look at the amount of stuff, I get a little bit overwhelmed, and I'm working on that. I'm working on restructuring things a little bit so that I feel a little bit less overwhelmed about all of the stuff. But I think that's it for today. I don't think I'm back next week, actually. I think we're going to skip next week because, yeah, I will be in Vegas listening to music. So no stream on the 19th, and then we'll be back the next week. And anybody who's still here, thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you all. And I will catch you in the next one.